and welcome to the Miracle Mile podcast. This is Mario Fios here. Today we're going to have a good little discussion about live music, introducing JCMUSICSCENE.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. All right, and let's start with a few introductions because a lot of people follow Instagram accounts, like let's say something about pets and dog walking and stuff like that. But very little do a lot of people go into the nitty gritty of who a certain person is. For example, I follow an account called Union City Living NJ.
Yep.
You're probably well aware of them.
Very familiar.
Yeah. And before they started interacting with us at Reach, I had no idea who the person behind the account was. So a lot of people will follow accounts, but not know or recognize who the person is behind the accounts. And that's important. So, can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What's your name?
Sure. So my name is Jacqueline Smith. People call me Jackie, so that's how most people refer to me.
Sure.
But it's true, many people do not know that I'm the person behind JCMUSICSCENE.
Okay.
Like many of you guys, I consider myself a Jersey girl first and foremost. So that's a huge part of my personality. And huge into the arts, and I'm an arts enthusiast.
Okay.
So,
and where are you originally from? What's your location?
I'm from West Milford, New Jersey.
Okay, cool.
It's 45 minutes northwest out of here. So different. There's trees, lakes, forests, wildlife. We used to see black bear like every single day.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And what brought you out to Jersey City?
I went to school at FIT, originally in New York City. I was always more of a city person. I mean, I love the ocean as well, but I never saw myself living where I grew up. Granted, I appreciate nature, but I needed more culture, more art, more diversity.
Oh, it's interesting to see someone say that coming from New York and then reeling on over to Jersey City.
It was kind of like the natural fit for me because I love New Jersey so much. So once I graduated school, I knew for fact that I had to live across the river, stay Jersey side. But then I also wanted to make sure that I was close enough to New York City to be able to visit my friends, to be able to commute to my jobs at the time, and obviously to see shows, to go to museums, etc.
Okay, cool. All right, awesome. I'm glad to hear that perspective and origin story. I feel like a lot of what makes the impact within an account like yours is knowing that even if someone doesn't know your name or doesn't know like where you came from, it's the personhood behind something like what you do that makes people interested in something like following an account. So personally, I've always had an eye on your account, but I've never known you. So it's a pleasure to meet you finally.
No, it's great to meet you as well.
Alrighty. So let's get into the question of what made you go into starting an account, calling it JCMUSICSCENE, and going on thereafter. Where did that come from in you?
It's so funny because there's two huge things that factored into it, and they both come from a place of loss, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
I had done 8 years in media planning, which is the very analytical, businessy side of advertising. It was like 12-hour days. I was behind the computer nonstop. There's a lot of high stress. I essentially got to a point in my career where I was never feeling fulfilled, and I felt like I hit a block.
Okay.
You always say if you don't want to do what your bosses are doing, you're probably not in the right field.
Yeah, that's very natural.
So I did end up getting let go from an agency, which is very common in my field.
Yeah.
But I made a decision that I wasn't going to go back to that career path. I was unemployed for a second, which was super scary for me.
Yep. I mean, unemployment for most people is a very, very existential moment.
Yeah. So I was super afraid, but I was like, I cannot go back to it. I had a huge issue in trying to prove myself, though, to other more creative marketing agency type of roles, because people would say, well, how do we know you're going to be happy here when you've already done 8 years? Or we're sorry, but you're too senior. We don't want to give you a shot because we don't feel right about letting you come in and completely
job descriptions can be so specific about what they look into. And it sometimes becomes very difficult, even if you might have ABC credentials. Some positions in lines will like specifically look for things that cater to exactly what they want. And I feel like that role position is something that can be intimidating to some people. Yeah.
So it was very difficult. And I realized that I needed to prove myself.
Okay.
I created JCMUSICSCENE as an outlet to show what I could honestly do. It was like, I want to take this to a company and say that I built this brand from the ground up. I did it on my own.
Okay.
Um,
When you first started that account, did that username not exist?
no, it
You
didn't.
capitalized on such a
Surprisingly,
good account name. When
surprisingly.
I found your account for the first time, I was like, damn, I wish I saved that one. Like that's a great
Well,
find.
so that was the other thing. I mean, it seemed like there was an opportunity here. The
Hmm.
scene already existed.
Yeah.
I'm not taking,
Like
any
you
credit.
didn't
I didn't
pioneer
create
it. Yeah,
it
yeah,
by any means. It was here.
yeah.
But what I also saw, and being that I also was working in New York City for such a long time,
Mhm.
was that there were always so many shows in Brooklyn. There were
Yeah.
always so many shows in the Lower East Side and Queens, etc.
Mhm.
And I'm like, we have so many creative people, artists, musicians, entrepreneurs, music fans like myself living right here. And
Mhm.
I just felt like there was more of an opportunity to bring the community
Yeah.
together.
We're on the same page. We're very similar in that regard. I just realized you have a New Jersey necklace.
Yes, I do.
That is so cool.
People make fun of me a lot for it, but I'm like,
Dude,
no, Jersey pride through and
there's
through.
something really, really, really crucial in my opinion about not letting that downplay or down talk about New Jersey like limit someone who actually cares about the area.
Yeah.
Because honestly, it's a very common meme to be looking at New Jersey as the butt of a joke. And it's like I understand the whole referencings behind that, but honestly, there's a lot of things in New Jersey that are so
Yeah.
overly slept on. The moment I've always okay, when I was younger, like when I was like from like let's say child to like teen, I was one of the people that was like I can't wait to get the hell out of Jersey. La, la, la. I was one of those people, so I
Yeah.
understand where the sentiment comes from. Then I went out to Rutgers, and when I went out to Rutgers, I experienced a world that showed me that it doesn't really matter what state you're in, you can find something to do in whatever you find yourself in. And then after graduating from there, I came back here and I recognized the worth that you recognize for Jersey City, but in this area as
Yeah.
well. So I understand where the sentiment of like discontent projected comes from this area. But at the same time, there's just so much that New Jersey has to offer. I remember the first time that I personally recognized that we live in a pretty good state was during the pandemic. I feel like the
Sure.
response that our state had was very phenomenal compared to other ones, especially for how populated
Yeah,
we were.
I agree 100%.
So like those were moments where I was like, you know what? We're pretty good off here. Like I don't know why people complain so hard. We're right across in New York, so it's kind of like the Big Brother complex. I feel,
Yeah.
you know, like it's like people recognize that as like the center of the world and all that, and that's why people will look to the left and be like, yeah, but what does that do? And it's hard
No.
to live up to that expectation, but I feel like, as you said before, there's so much opportunity and potential that I can't personally turn my back on it.
Yeah, no, I think we live in such a great state. I think the people are very tough love and honest and
Mhm.
hardworking.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many different cultures. So the diversity really plays into what you're able to achieve from a creativity
Yeah,
perspective.
for sure.
And we have the ocean
Uh-huh.
and we have New York City, but we have slightly fresher air.
Slightly fresher
Slightly.
air. I agree. All right. So when did your account start? You remember like around what span of time you
Yeah,
opened that
so
up?
that was actually the second part of what I was going to say. It
Mhm.
was actually born very impulsively in August 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And my best friend had just suffered an unexpected loss of her
Uh-huh.
husband. She lived in California. I felt very helpless at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of manifested as
The-
me being super emotional. I'm saying that I probably had 2 or 3 days where I was crying my eyes out. I
Yeah.
felt like I couldn't be there for her.
Mm-hmm.
Woke up one day and was like, this is enough. I need
Yeah.
to do something constructive. I have all this energy, I have all this passion. I'm not helping anyone by being, overly emotional. It's not solving a problem for her, myself. And I had been, working a few gigs here or there, still trying to find my footing from my job transition.
Yeah.
I kind of just pulled the plug and I said, that's it. I'm creating this today. Like it happened like that. I didn't have a well thought out plan. I just knew I had to dive in.
You know what's really spooky? I started being an event coordinator in August 2019. So like we both took a step in the same field at the same time, which is really overwhelming me right now. Yeah, I did the same. Like I literally have the same like situation where I wasn't doing anything
Yeah.
because I graduated from college May 2019.
Sure.
And I had that whole famous "all right, what now" situation.
Absolutely.
So what I decided personally throughout that situation was I decided that I'm the kind of person that when I have a noticeable habit that I want to change, I will forcibly like get into a position that slowly creates the change, whether or not I'm comfortable or not. I'll rip
Sure.
the band-aid of complacency. So what I did for a summer was I forced myself to like just not do anything. And
Yeah.
my reason was because I became someone who like had too much fun in my eyes. When you go into
Okay.
like the work industry or like let's say postgraduate world, like you're expected to have like certain credentials, brown nose your way up, like follow the line and stuff like that. And I had personal things in the works because I was a psychology major. I was offered a job opportunity at the Douglas Developmental Disability Center to like take care of autistic children.
Very cool.
And I was in this position at the time where I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to do it or if I was going to like figure out what I wanted to do myself.
Mhm.
So I took the summer to like stop doing things that I considered negative at the time. I was partying too much. I was doing way too many substances. So I decided that I was going to like tone it down, stay home, and just focus on myself. So I had the most dry and boring and non-action oriented summer of my life. And then finally in August, just similarly to what you went
Yeah.
through, I was like, all right, that's enough. I got to do something. And I started doing what I do now
Yeah.
today. So it's very interesting that you said like August 2019 because that's right around the
Well,
field of what I went by.
I know you guys will laugh at me. A lot of people do, but I'm
Hmm.
also hugely into astrology.
That's not
I'm pretty sure at that point in time there was also
like a
some
shift,
crazy eclipses
like a
going on,
shift.
if
Sure,
you will,
sure.
which happened in the summer. So
Hmm.
it explains it's like more of a collective
Yeah, I
movement,
mean,
energy wise.
personally, I don't belittle someone for their belief in some field, like
Oh
astrology.
no, people just laugh.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
not
yeah.
cruel about it, but
I personally see things. I
yeah,
personally see things as like energy focuses. So it's kind of like to me, it feels like there are moments where things shift for everyone.
absolutely.
I personally am more intuitive with my belief systems. I don't really like look into like the nitty gritty of like what a faith system says or what a let's say a study says.
Yeah.
So for example, like back in like the early last summer, like about a year ago, when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, everyone was I felt like everyone had like a weight of seriousness to them for a minute throughout the
Yeah,
beginning of the summer. It's because there was a whole shift in consciousness going
absolutely.
on,
It
you
was
know?
an awakening
So
for
yeah,
sure.
so that's I feel like it's one of those things that are necessary. But let's get back to you as you know what you did for
Sure.
for your account because I feel like your account was able to do a lot within its time alive. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, how did you go and get yourself integrated into the music scene to the point where I feel like you're relatively well known within any artist that I've spoken to. So how did you get to that position, starting from where you said you had
Yeah.
to like leap in and try it out?
Well, so what I will say is that people are very focused on themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The first thing I did when I created JC Music Scene, again, I did it so impulsively, was I just started following accounts of local businesses, local artists,
Mm-hmm.
and anyone that looked like they were affiliated with the arts whatsoever.
Okay.
I started sharing their events. I never saw the profile's purpose being to share events.
Yeah, yeah.
But through sharing people's events, I gave them a reason to like me so that it came to a point where I was able to approach people easily.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, it's hard for them to just get a conversation with an artist
Yeah.
or a business owner
Mhm.
because they're like, who are you and
Yeah.
why should I care?
Yeah,
But they
yeah.
saw, okay, you know what? This person is sharing my events.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cool. And I brought together
It opens the
a
window.
community
Yeah.
that like I have a desired audience now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Literally all living right there.
Mhm.
So there's even more value. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm doing it for free.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of like it made it so easy. And then I wanted to know more about artists and what they were up to. I started featuring them. I do those
Mhm.
bi-weekly. I
Mhm.
created curated playlists.
Good shit. Yeah.
Again, it's all like free kind of publicity and
Yeah, yeah.
promotion for these people. But then now they're coming to me being like, when can I get on the playlist? How do I get a feature?
Mhm.
How can I be booked for a show? It almost is like a two-way street now because they see, okay, here's someone that's celebrating me, that's showcasing me. And actually, I can use that audience. And actually, I can use that audience because it's right here.
Yeah.
It hits the people that are right around me,
Mhm, mhm.
which is super valuable.
Yeah, yeah. I have for lack of a better term, let's call it a entrepreneur role model.
Yeah.
Someone that Reach works with. It's someone who is like the president of Save Latin America.
Sure.
He's like a 94, 96 year old man. But basically, he started off a lot of things within New York at the beginning in Manhattan with the bodega scene, also in
That's
New Jersey.
cool.
And
Yeah.
what he did was he basically in the long term he rallied all of them to have like their own impact in the community, because if you collect all the bodegas in like an inner city,
Yeah.
like you can do a lot with that, right? And so the idea is that a lot of people who come to do big things in the world will always look into the concept of treating the people, and like doing things for the services of like without expecting anything in return
Yeah.
specifically, but because humans tend to circulate around people depending on first and foremost how they can see themselves applied to it. So it's like how you said, where like a lot of people tend to be self-centered, but more so it's not even that it's selfish, it's more so
It's
that
human nature.
it takes that like interaction for people to be like, I appreciate that you did that for me, let me help you back out.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's very necessary to have that kind of interaction, because otherwise it can seem like you're trying to get something out of someone. If you're just like, hey, I don't know you, I've never interacted with your account or your personhood,
Yeah.
but can I do this with you? Can you do this with me? It's so direction and motive based that at that point doesn't work out. It's much more natural to, I guess, scratch the back to get your back scratched back as well. But I normally lead by an example of not expecting anything in return, just
Yeah.
because I feel like that's more natural. Um, I had a question for you, and the question came upon the light of if you could see Hudson County like progress,
Yeah.
let's say in 10 years or so, what would be some aspirations that you see in Hudson County based on the arts? Like, what's some progress that or something you'd like to see manifested in our environment that isn't right now, that you
Yeah.
might see potential in but isn't right now? If there's anything that comes to mind.
Well, I know that they are rehabbing the Lowe's Theater in Jersey City,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like is a huge initiative for the future that I'm excited about. Beyond that, I hope that living in the COVID world has kind of taught us that
Yeah.
we need to be a little bit more creative with the types of spaces that we're creating for
Yeah.
performances. So maybe creating more spaces that are outdoors in some way,
Mm-hmm.
because I do think that's still a limitation given different noise ordinances and all of that stuff. Like that's
Yeah.
where we are falling behind some places like Brooklyn, for example.
Yeah.
We just don't have the capabilities structurally speaking to house the music. We do need more
Yeah.
venue spaces.
Yeah, I was considering this when COVID started, that there's so many things that the pandemic showed us that we are not properly equipped for. I feel like a lot of the sentiment of how our society was run was essentially, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. And although a lot of things sociologically speaking are broken, economically speaking are broken, because there wasn't like a let's say a noticeable barefaced ass moment for it, everyone just kept moving on with it. And I feel like, as you said, the pandemic showed that like there needs to be more spaces for things. And now that there's literally a pandemic, that if you're too close to people, shoulder to shoulder wise, you can spread something. It now becomes an insistence that we need locations like how you said, outdoors or spacious gatherings and stuff like that. And I feel like it's an interesting thing to notice that this pandemic had to open our eyes to things that if the pandemic didn't happen, sure, there'd be a lot of lives saved because people wouldn't be dying from the disease and whatnot.
Sure.
But at the same time, we would also be moving the same way without fixing anything. And I feel like the only thing you can really get out of ruin, or let's say downfalls, is that you have the ability to pick things back into a better order the next time around.
Absolutely.
So personally, something that I would like to see changed in our community would be a harder focus on the arts. If you go to anywhere, like for example, like even Jersey City itself or New York, you tend to see like these giant graffiti like paintings and stuff like
I
that.
love street art. Yeah.
This area itself, it feels like it's a very rare commonality to have. There are some storefronts that do that, but they will like explicitly look out for a commission based. That's not common in this area. I feel like more than anything, not even just like drawing and graffitiing on walls, I feel like what I would like to see is let's call it businesses and entrepreneurs understanding the value behind art better. because if, and I've said this before on a couple conversations, but I feel if people were to recognize the value behind local artists and better incentivize, whether it be events or I don't know, media displays and stuff like that, um, I would say it would bring a better community interaction to our areas if, let's say, Bergenline had like a Renaissance type
Yeah,
of gallery,
absolutely.
like a block of closed things so that you can like show your art and stuff like that, because it helps the community interact. Not only that, if your community looks appealing and attractive and positive, tourism increases, which increases commerce. I just wish that I could see a harder grasp in the art world within our community, and it's not even just because I'm an artist. It's because I believe that especially in my community, this area over here, it's an immigrants community. Like most people here are Hispanic
Yep.
or some kind of new immigrant.
Hmm.
And when you analyze the people who are, the average of the adults, they're people who came from X, Y, and Z countries and have little to no foundation and are trying to create a foundation so that their children can therefore grow and do something with their livelihoods, right? But what happens to the child that is born and raised in this area from parents who don't have a foundation? What happens is they don't have the same survival instinct that father who came from a country with a dollar and a dream has,
Yeah.
where he's trying to establish and feed a family. A child like, for example, me, doesn't have that survival instinct. What I have is a love for art. And that tends to happen in immigrant locations.
Sure.
So I think that an inevitable process next would have to be in advancements in the arts. And it's taking our location a little while to understand that. And that's why I'm so
Yeah.
personally focused on it. It's because like I know that if I personally stop paying attention to it, it's not gonna help the case at all.
Yeah, I mean, well, and with you saying that, in me running JC Music Scene,
Mm-hmm.
I do now have people from Philadelphia, from
Mm-hmm.
Delaware, from Pennsylvania
Paying
coming
attention
to
here
me
and
and
there,
saying,
yeah.
"How can I play that show up by you?" And unfortunately, at
Mm-hmm.
this point in time, that's not completely up to me. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to shine more of a light on local people right
Yeah,
now
yeah,
at the
yeah.
moment because that's my niche audience. But
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is like some interest just being created from the buzz around it.
Well, for sure, yeah. And the idea is to further elaborate on what it is that's going on here until eventually I feel uh, a personal better return on those endeavors.
Yep.
I have another question for you, and the question is uh, because no creative or entrepreneur or business can get as far as it gets without understanding its environment. I think it's important that we recognize or understand either peers or creatives that we respect or admire. Are there a few people
Sure.
that you come to mind when you think of creatives that you personally appreciate?
So I really like what We Are Jersey magazine is
Oh yeah,
doing.
yeah, that's a good one.
So they're celebrating local artists similar to ourselves, but in a much more blown out way.
Blown
I would
out
say
perspective,
they have
yeah.
merchandising, they do
Hmm.
branded photo shoots.
Hmm.
They do a lot with music videos on their social, but they have a digital presence and print, which I still feel like there's something about having that tangible
Yeah.
magazine to hold that is
Hmm.
very appealing to artist types anyways.
Hmm.
I like what they're doing. I'm actually most inspired by a lot of new businesses, if that
Mm.
makes sense. Like,
I'm the
I
same.
consider them creatives as much as, an artist themselves
Sure.
because I
It's a
think
craft.
they're an artist for their brand.
Hmm.
I really like what 902 Brewing is doing just with what I see, the types of partnerships that they're leveraging constantly. And I feel like they're really capitalizing on not only aligning themselves with different musicians and talent, but also creating different brand integrations for different lines. Like they did a line with the Hoboken Girl. They've done lines of beers and sour ales and spiked seltzers with local artists. I think that's cool because they're always thinking like a step beyond.
Okay.
So there's someone that's just, on my radar at the moment. And then Hoboken has a new venue, Monrose, which I see being really creative with the types of acts that they're bringing in as well and the
Mhm.
aesthetic. So those are just some people that I admire from a creative standpoint, as well as local bloggers. I know she sometimes gets hated on, but I have so much respect for Chickpea or
Mm.
Lynn as she now is. I think that by taking a huge step and, not knowing if it was going to lead anywhere by taking that risk.
Mm-hmm.
She's just someone that's admirable to me. I do consider her a creative, as well as Don't Sit at Home. That's another good one. That vlog is
I
awesome.
know that one. I'll have to look into that. Interesting. Awesome. Okay. My next question would be the concept of peers. And by peers, I mean whether you work with them or not, or it's something you consider someone who does similar things as to what you do.
Sure.
Do you have any peers that you would consider shouting out that you respect or admire for what they do?
Yes, I actually have a long list, and hopefully I can get through
Well,
them.
you don't have to. You don't have to shout out the whole list.
No,
But as long as
I
you,
want to give a few people a shout out.
go
So
for it. Go for
I
it.
personally work alone with JC Music Scene, but I
Mhm.
do like to partner with other organizations.
When it comes to
So
specific
I have
projects.
a lot of gratitude for Rocket Docket because that's headed by Dancing Tony, who is the former owner of FM Bar. He does all of the cemetery shows that people get really excited for. He gave me an opportunity to book last year. That was the first time I got into booking. He's always working on the giant outdoor festivals since COVID. So he's someone. Corey Zach from Cocoon Studios does curated showcases at his studio. We also have Mike Hassan. He does curated showcases as well. He's the latest noise.
Okay.
So they both do something very similar, bringing artists together, but in a more intimate setting. Break a Leg Entertainment for
That's an interesting name.
bringing in hip hop artists. He does a lot with the hip hop community. He does booking shows and also, rap battles and stuff like that.
Okay.
So a lot of respect for him. And then Tom Gallo, Look at My Records. He does write-ups about all different album releases in the area. Really cool blog. Oh, and Jim Testa from NJ.com and Jersey Beat. Great writer. He focuses solely on Hudson County artists. So he's definitely someone to know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had an arsenal of names ready for that.
Hopefully I mentioned them all.
Fantastic. All right. So my next question stems off of something that you just mentioned yourself about the pandemic. But essentially, I feel like almost everyone, honestly, who had some kind of service or some kind of like practice or craft or discipline, was clearly shifted and affected by the pandemic. Everyone had to learn how to move and readjust. Personally, as someone who does what you do, which is, promote local music and, pay attention and curate lists and, you organize things for projects. What were some setbacks that you experienced during your time within the pandemic that you weren't facing prior to? If you want, I could start that conversation because I'm an event coordinator. So I directly got offended. Like I directly got affected. Like I remember thinking like when it first hit, is the universe like directly trying to destroy me? Like it felt so personal, and I hate to make it about myself because it's not about like my experience. I didn't have anyone close to me die, unfortunately. But I remember as someone who would go to local clients and speak to them as someone who could promise to fill up their storefront, that task and that role had to readjust because now it's not favorable to have people shoulder deep, just like packed in a room because we're in a pandemic now. So personally, my whole job force was like just like paused and completely disoriented, and that's because like I'm literally events. So personally, it directly affected that aspect of me. Everything went on pauses. Everyone did, the first few months, like starting March or so, everyone kind of stayed at home and no one knew what was going on. The resurgence of hospital rates went up, and then into summer, people started trying to act up and go out and try and be social and all that. And so I was in a weird place because I was in this place where I was like, is it okay now? Do I want to be on that side of history where I'm like promoting crazy things? So personally, the way that I was affected is I had to relearn rather, what it is to do your best, because to me, doing my best was getting the word out there so much that it brought through 40, 50, 60 people or whatever. And I couldn't do that at the time because, pandemic. So, would you have anything that you consider be something that the pandemic affected your ability to work in?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very fortunate in that JC Music Scene is just my side creative project, so
Hmm.
it's not a source of
Yeah,
income.
yeah.
I have a day job in the city, which
Okay.
I was thankfully able to maintain throughout this whole time.
That's good.
So for me, the hardest part at first was I felt that the profile was starting to gain momentum
Hmm.
at the time that the pandemic hit, and that we did a live mixer in real life. You know, it had a good turnout for the brand being so young at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Had like 30 people in a smaller
Hmm.
venue in Hoboken. Um, but it went well and we wanted to do more of those. And then, it was kind of like, okay, time to hit pause.
Mm-hmm.
However, because again, I never laid out like a clear, like,
Yeah.
this is exactly what I expect from this profile to be. I
Hmm.
kind of just rode with it. And I feel like I just watched JC Music Scene evolve in a different light. I was sharing people's Instagram lives. Obviously, people never stopped releasing albums. So there was still content to be shared. And I do think it served a purpose of bringing the community together because, that's like arts was such an important thing for us to still be able to maintain. Like, yeah, we couldn't go out to live shows. And I think that's the part that many of us miss the
Yeah.
most.
Yeah.
But artists never stop creating.
Yeah,
And a
creating
lot
is
of them
constant.
were fueled by the time to finally dive into
All the time in the world.
recording. And
Mhm.
for me, I was strategizing, okay, well, what am I going to do next anyways?
Yeah.
So for me, I felt that I kept moving. It might not have been the way that I was envisioning moving when it was February.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is still serving a purpose.
Mhm.
I never felt bored.
So you just had to readjust.
Yeah.
Essentially. Awesome. Okay. And the next question would be, so now that the pandemic seems to be under control, or rather bettered than prior
Yeah.
months, what is your outlook on live music show scenes or anything happening socially here on after?
I definitely have seen even the past month or two, stuff is just reopening up.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm doing my own branded showcase
I
on
did see
May
that. I did
13th
see
at
that.
902 Brewing.
Fun.
It might be a recurring series if it goes well. It's kind of like the guinea pig.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I just see so many people all over Hudson County, everywhere doing live events.
Yeah.
The
It's about
cemetery
time.
shows
It's about time,
are back that I mentioned. So I think that we're getting to a better place, knock on wood.
Yeah, for sure. Personally, we're actually starting up on live music shows ourselves. Literally, there's one tomorrow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll be sharing the information with you after this conversation. But now we're getting to the final closing of this discussion, and the conversation is going to go into this section called promo time, where I'm going to give you some time to talk about anything that you're in the works with, any projects you're working on, anything that's on your mind, anything you want to shout out. And then I'll give my promo time, and then we're just going to wrap it up and call it a day there.
Very cool.
Okay, so is there anything you'd like to promote, anything you'd like to talk about? May 13th,
I feel like, I already touched on this, but May 13th, I'm having my own event, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. at 902 Brewing. It's going to be indie rock themed.
Oh, what day is it? What day is it landing on?
Thursday.
Okay.
So it's free admission. You don't have to RSVP. There is a link on my Instagram page, which is at JCMUSICSCENE. It features slang terms, who is actually a guy, Vince. He's from JC Studios, very talented.
Sure.
Sir Synthesis. They're actually Union City based.
They were here earlier this week. Yeah.
I was trying to get Thrust originally, and then he's like, I got this new band formed. I listened to them. I'm like, okay, actually, this is even better.
Yeah, Sir Synthesis.
And then there's a band called I'm 53. So they're not exactly from Hudson County, but they're from North and Central.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with
very
people coming
talented.
through. Yeah.
It's cool because all three of these acts are in different phases of either releasing new content or having a giant single out or just building their momentum.
Still a good curated organization.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Personally, I'm working on an event tomorrow, and the episode will probably be out by the time that happens, so it doesn't matter at this point for me. But essentially, I take pride in trying to curate things in a way that it all blends nicely.
Sure.
So for example, we're doing this thing, and I'm saying this to the camera now because it's promotion time, but it'll be out. It'll happen by the time this is out, so it doesn't really matter. But essentially, we're having a show at a local restaurant called Trattoria Napoli, which is one of the guests that we had on the podcast. I think it was like episode 5 or 6 or something. And we're gonna have he has a new outdoor seating place. We're gonna use it. And we're gonna have an R&B singer called Jay there. We're gonna have a female musician called G. She's from I believe Queens or Bronx, but she has a lot of ties in the Hudson area, so she's coming on through that regard. And we also have someone called Claude Davis. I don't know if you know him.
I've heard of.
Yes,
Yes.
He's performing with us
cool.
tomorrow. Yeah, I love his music. So that's what I'm focusing on there on after. Besides that, we're also having art gallery shows within the month of May.
Yeah.
And we're starting to try and pepper our live shows with that restaurant I spoke about, Trattoria Napoli.
Yeah.
So that's what we're focusing on. We also had a fashion show that was in the works, but honestly, we're probably going to be pending on process on that because there's a few problems in the workings on it. But that's what we're working on. We're looking into also more outdoor projects, and I'm also going to be pushing a live stream show. I had a live stream show last May. It was called Virtual Culture.
Okay.
And it went well, but essentially I want to do a sequel on that. So that's what I've been working on. That's what we'll have there. We'll give more announcements there on after. That's essentially it for today.
Awesome.
You did fantastic, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Alrighty. Say bye to the camera.
Bye.
See
I'm
ya.
like, I don't know which way it is.
It's okay.